Hello, everyone. My name is Choma Azi, and we want to welcome you to African Communities Together TPS seminar, Temporary Protected Status. We are going to start off by doing some introductions and then get into the details about what temporary protected status is, how to apply, and frequently asked questions. As I just mentioned, my name is Choma Azi, and I'm the National Legal Director with African Communities Together. I have been with the organization for about a year, and I am currently in the location of our next chapter, which is going to be Pennsylvania, specifically Philadelphia. We have 2 chapters currently, our flagship in New York, as well as our other chapter in the DMV area, the DC, Maryland, Northern Virginia area. And I'm also joined today by my colleague, Aissatou Diallo, who will introduce herself as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aissatou Diallo, as Shirma mentioned, and I am the New York City Legal Director. We are happy to be here with you today to give this brief introduction into TPS and what it is and the requirements. And with that, I can start. So we'll just go through an overview. Very briefly, we'll talk about what TPS is, how to apply, what countries are designated for TPS, and what makes you not eligible, but also the benefits. And then we'll be happy to answer some frequently asked questions. So what is temporary protected status? So temporary protective status was created in 1990 and Congress enacted it and added it into the Immigration and Nationality Act. But TPS is just a status that's provided to people who are living in the United States, but are unable to return to their countries because of unsafe conditions. And some unsafe conditions can be anything from an armed conflict, like a civil war, an environmental disaster, such as an earthquake or a hurricane, or any other extraordinary or temporary condition. There are some other environmental factors that can play into why TPS is granted for a country. So next, these are the countries that are designated for temporary protective status right now, and they include Afghanistan, Ukraine, Venezuela, El Salvador, Honduras, Haiti, Nepal, Syria, Nicaragua, Burma, Yemen, Sudan, Somalia, South Sudan, and Cameroon. To be eligible for TPS, you have to be a national of the country that DHS has given TPS status to. If you are not a national of that country, then you have to show that you have lived in that country. You also have to file for TPS during the registration period or the re-registration period. There are some circumstances where they will allow for late filing and you can apply then. You also have to be in the United States when your country is designated for TPS. And you have to continuously live in the United States from the time that your country got TPS to when you're applying for it. And usually for each country, they will designate the particular time frame that they're looking into. So what is the application process for TPS? To file for TPS, there's an application, it's the I-821. And the application cost is $50. And then you also have to pay for biometrics, which is $85. So that's an additional cost. One of the benefits of TPS, which Chioma will get into a little bit, is that you can get workers authorization with TPS. And you would file the request for employment authorization, the I-765, and there is an additional cost to filing that application with your TPS application. When you file your application for TPS, there are also documentary evidence that you have to provide with it. And that includes identity and nationality evidence. So that is any evidence that proves that you are a national of the country that is being designated for TPS. So anything from a birth certificate to a passport that you may have. You have to show proof of entry evidence, so proof of your entry into the United States, and that can be anything from an I-94, a visa stamp in your passport. And then lastly, continuous residence evidence that you have been in the United States since the time that it's being designated, and that can include anything from medical records, school records, leases, a bank statement, anything that kind of shows that you've been in the country during that designated period. And with that, I will pass it over to Chioma.
Thank you, Aisatu. So we've just gone over what makes someone eligible to apply for TPS. There are other situations where you will either be ineligible to apply or you can lose your eligibility. So you are ineligible to apply or you can lose your eligibility if you are convicted of a felony or two misdemeanors, two or more misdemeanors committed in the United States. If you are inadmissible due to security reasons or national security concerns, you can be ineligible if you are subject to the mandatory asylum bar. So that includes people who are found to have been persecutors, or individuals determined to have been involved with terrorist activities, or if you have filed a frivolous asylum application as well. If you are not currently present in the United States at the time your country was designated, or you do not continue physical presence. So you cannot apply for TPS if you are not within the United States at the time the designation has come down. So if you're in the country that has been just announced for TPS, unfortunately, you're not eligible. It's only available for people who are currently in the country at the time that you need to be according to what the designation time period is. Similarly, if you have been granted TPS, but you travel and you stay out of the country too long, you will lose it. You will lose that status because you have not maintained physical presence. TPS, you can also be ineligible for TPS if you don't apply timely. So this is one of the key factors of this program. You have to apply within the registration period, or whatever period has been provided. And it's usually a very wide period of time. And not only do you have to apply within that period, you have to keep applying to maintain your status within the TPS program for your particular country. TPS is something whereby you have to maintain it continuously. So if you applied initially, you registered during the initial registration period, but you failed to reapply, 2 years, 3 years down the line, you're out of the program and you can't get back in unless there's some kind of exception that's later on created. So it's really important that once you apply for TPS, you have to keep re-registering at the time it's necessary. Next slide. So what are some of the benefits of TPS? So the obvious and the first benefit is that you are not removable or detainable based on your status, assuming you're not otherwise inadmissible or acquire any kind of criminal contact or national security issues that could cause DHS, give DHS cause to detain you. Additionally, TPS allows you to work. It allows you to work. It gives you a work authorization document. And generally, once you have a work authorization document, it opens up other avenues. It allows you to get most likely a state ID in most countries, and generally just makes your life in the US a little bit smoother. And it also allows you to apply for advanced parole or travel authorization. If you're on TPS, you must get permission to travel before leaving the country. You cannot travel and come back without that advanced parole or permission, because your status by nature is not permanent. It is temporary, and it is basically a program that is choosing not to remove you. So you have to make sure, excuse me, you have to make sure you apply for permission to travel before leaving the country. And depending on your situation, you may also need permission. You may also need a travel document, depending on your situation, depending on whether you've also applied for asylum, something of that nature. I want to cover some few frequently asked questions at this time, because especially for our newest country that was just designated, Cameroon, there have been a lot of questions from people wondering the benefits of TPS versus asylum. We have seen a lot of folks, by the time the designation for Cameroon was announced a few months ago, there's a significant number of Cameroonian nationals that have already applied for asylum. Maybe by now they already have work permits. So they're wondering, why should they apply for TPS, if at all? And I would say that it's an absolute must to at least consider applying for TPS if you're an asylum applicant as well. First of all, go to a very experienced and licensed attorney, somebody who's knowledgeable in this area, to weigh the options, examine your asylum application, try to get a sense of how strong it could be compared to the benefits that TPS is offering. The thing to understand about TPS is generally it's announced for countries that are already having some kind of strife, whether it's natural disaster or political or some other issue where there are major challenges in the country. But it's important for people to understand that asylum is a very difficult benefit to get in this country. The standard and bar for asylum is extremely high. Majority of people who apply for asylum are denied, or they are referred for further processing in removal court, meaning when they go for their interviews, they are not able to convince or establish that they have been persecuted, persecuted to the level that you have to establish under the law. So TPS to some extent softens that burden. It's a lower threshold, it's a lower bar to meet. You basically have to establish that you've been in the country for a certain period of time and that you're a national of that country and you don't have any other factors that exclude you. So while I do appreciate that a lot of people feel strongly about applying for asylum because it does give a pathway to permanent status, unfortunately, most people are not going to be granted asylum. So we really encourage people, take the time out, consider it, weigh the options, because you may feel strongly about your asylum claim, but if you didn't apply on time, if you lost that window to apply and your asylum claim is later denied, it's going to be difficult to get back into the program because, as I mentioned, you have to apply within the registration period. One critical thing to note, particularly for Cameroon, is if you are a Cameroonian national and you have been in the country for less than a year, because as hopefully you all are aware, you need to apply for asylum within a year of your arrival in the country. If you apply later than a year, you will have a major challenge, and you'll have to establish and explain why you filed late. So if you apply for asylum, or if you're considering applying for asylum, you've been in the country for less than a year, applying for TPS stops the clock. So in other words, applying for TPS preserves your right to apply for asylum later on. You will not lose that time, or you will not be, the time that you have applied for TPS will not be counted against that 1 year deadline. So let me give you an example. Let's say that you've been in the country, you're a Cameroonian national, and you arrived in America 6 months ago, and TPS has just come out. And you apply for TPS, you're granted, and let's say TPS ends after 4 years. After that 4-year period, you are still eligible to go back and apply for asylum, because as far as USCIS is concerned, the clock stopped at that 6-month period when you applied for TPS. So this is another major benefit as to why folks should seriously consider and understand that TPS does bring you benefit, even if you're also considering an asylum application. But this benefit really comes if you have not yet already applied for asylum. If you've already applied, then the wheels are already in motion. But if you are still in the country, you have not yet applied, it's less than a year since you've been here, I would encourage people to seriously consider applying for TPS, preserving your asylum rights if you choose to do it, but apply for TPS because you will be almost certain to be granted, so long as you're not ineligible for the reasons we already discussed. So, it's just important for people to understand that, yes, it's a temporary program. It doesn't give you a pathway to citizenship, but it is a lower bar to meet. So there are a lot of benefits for the fact that you can remain here as long as the designation is in effect. And you may be able to find another means to adjust your status. You just don't know what could happen. So it's just really critical to not limit your options to just one program, or not just be tunnel vision that, oh, I want to only apply for asylum, this is it, or I only want to go this way. It's important, preserve your rights. So when you apply for TPS, you preserve your rights. But if you miss the window, you can't really get back in. And this isn't just for asylum. Like, let's say you are, and we've seen these situations sometimes in our office. You have a US citizen boyfriend or girlfriend, and they've discussed getting married, and you feel like, oh, I don't need TPS because I'm on my way to the altar and I'm going to get married. But you decide not to apply for TPS because you feel that you're comfortable, you're going for a green card. Something happens. Either you don't get married, or you get married and divorced really quick, or your spouse is in a position for you for one reason or the other. But you've missed the TPS window. So it's something that you really want to make sure that you consider. Don't discard TPS because it looks like it's the lesser option. It can still offer you a lot of benefits, and it can at least give you an opportunity to be here and see what else could come up down the line. Because the truth of the matter is, though it is a temporary program, there are some countries that have had TPS as designations for going on 20 years now. So you just don't know what can happen. Another frequently asked question that might come up, or people may have heard about, DED, otherwise known as Deferred Enforced Departure. You may have heard about that. What is Deferred Enforced Departure, and how is it different than temporary protected status? Currently, I believe that DED is only allotted for one country so far. I could be wrong, but my understanding is it's only allotted for Liberia currently. Deferred Enforced Departure is essentially a transition program from TPS. Liberia was granted TPS, I believe, back in the late 90s due to the war, the outbreak of the civil war that was happening there, but it was ended at some point. But advocates really pushed for a program that would allow people to gently still remain here, work here with permission, as opposed to abruptly ending and requiring people to go back home, to countries where they don't feel attached to or have, less establishment there. So functionally, the benefits that you get from TPS are the same in in Deferred Enforced Departure. So you are still eligible to apply for work authorization. You're eligible to apply for advanced parole. The designations can also be renewed and lengthened. It's essentially offering the same benefits, but the major difference is there's no official designation that your country is not safe anymore, but it's still giving you that protection that you won't be removed so long as you're not inadmissible or otherwise, get yourself into any issues that could cause you to be removed. So DED and TPS are very similar. It's just that if your country has a designation for DED, it means that officially, your country is considered safe enough to go back, but the government has decided to allow people to transition more slowly back to their home countries. The last thing I will want to add, it's not a frequently asked question, but it's just an important thing to note. TPS is really the result of strong advocacy from many community groups, organizations like ACT. So it's important to know that TPS does not happen in a bubble. It requires strong voices. It requires people like you and I stepping forward and advocating for our countries to say, we feel that this country is not safe enough for our nationals to go back to. Please provide us with this protection. So in addition to just considering applying and taking advantage of the benefits the program offers, we also encourage you to step up, use your voice, write to the government, write to us, join us when we participate in different activities, because these programs are really the result of strong and consistent and years-long advocacy. The Cameroonian TPS announcement that came down a couple months ago was really the result of many, many years of vocal advocacy at all levels. So we really encourage all of you to speak up, use your voice, and understand that it doesn't happen in a bubble. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. It really requires us to work hard. The Liberian community also did an excellent job. They've been doing an excellent job over the last 25, 30 years now to advocate for the protections that are granted under TPS and now DED. So it's really critical to know that TPS is a program that has required people fighting for it. So we're happy for the benefits, but it also requires a lot of work to maintain it. So please do keep that in mind. We will be hosting an additional TPS webinar that's going to go into a little bit more detail a little bit later. So we do encourage all of you to stick with us, follow us on our social media platforms, on our website, to know what's coming down the pipeline, because we also do other programs like this on other topics. We may be doing one on diversity visa as well, consular processing, other topics. So please do stick with us and feel free to reach out to us with any questions.